In this episode, we're talking about remembering Jesus, so sit back and stay tuned for more. Hey there, welcome to another episode of Monday Moments, the show in which we take a deeper dive into Sunday's sermon. My name is Travis, your host. With me today is Pastor Dennis. And today we are kind of doing two things a little bit, where I actually feel like y'all did this very well, where we hit the pause button on our first Corinthians sermon, or series, excuse me. It's not that we are ending it. We are literally hitting the pause button. And simultaneously starting our Sabbath series. For those of you who may not know, we do a Sabbath. It's a series, but really it's more than that. It's a focus. For 40 days, we focus on the gift of Sabbath and what it means, especially in a New Testament context. And every year, I feel like there's always something new, something different, something that's, revealed or refreshed or something. It's always such a great time, no matter how long somebody may or may not have been here.
It really is. Sabbath, I have been doing this now for over 30 years. And every year, it's just so like the Holy Spirit to just reveal more and more. It just keeps getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And so, it really is that. It's not this, okay, Sabbath is taking off a day of the week, or Sabbath is just not doing anything. No, it just gets deeper and deeper.
It does.
It's really cool.
It does. And it really, I think, challenges a lot of our paradigms, because we're so in that mode of, well, the Sabbath is a day where we go to church, or we do nothing, or but as you said, it's more than that. And I'm really excited to dive into that again this year.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that James said and has repeated, I think it's such great revelation. When we only take a day a week to Sabbath, then we're messing it up the other 6 days. I can't remember how he said it.
Yeah, it's something along the lines of, those 6 days end up robbing from or taking away from that one day.
Yeah, because God really did mean for us to enter into rest. Yeah. And the Old Testament shows it up, because it's not just the one day of Sabbath that they had, but they were seasons of Sabbath. That's really important to remember, is that this was not a one and done, but they had whole seasons of Sabbath. Their festivals were considered Sabbaths.
Right.
So that they set aside a lot of time just to be with God and with others.
And even, every so often, a whole year.
Yeah.
A whole year. I mean, you think about that. That's...
Yeah, let the land rest.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. What a great concept.
What a concept. I mean, the Lord really knows what he's doing. It should be no surprise. Well, and so diving into, this series is called Rhythms of the King. And so we're looking at the way Jesus lived his life as our model. And I was talking with our worship team before service, and I think so often we want to find those people or systems to look towards. What do I do? How do I do this? And unfortunately, we often look towards the things that our eyes can see. So it might be, an influencer, might be a politician, it might be a celebrity, it might be someone that we look up to. But the problem is, as with everybody, people are imperfect. And so at best, the model is imperfect, even with the best person. But in a lot of cases, I feel like, when we see those people that we look up to, when they fall or when they fail or when they, don't live up to our expectations or whatever, I think it can lead to a little bit of maybe disillusionment. And we take a look back and say, well, wait a minute, what am I supposed to do? And yet, if we go back and look at the way Jesus lived his life, that he lived in this continuous rhythm of Sabbath, there's our model, because, again, as God, he was the perfect man.
Yeah, and they kept accusing him of not obeying the Sabbath.
Yep.
They kept saying,
isn't that wild?
You're not doing the right thing. And he was like, are you kidding?
Yeah. Yeah.
I am in continual Sabbath because my life is in the right rhythm. And that's such a great point, because we have to remember that in this world you will have tribulation. So this is not about not having trouble in your life.
Right.
It's about walking with God and being with him. It's about learning, for example, how to pray without ceasing. That sounds like we have to walk around with our eyes closed and in a prayer closet with a long list.
Mm-hmm.
No, it means to continually know and practice the presence of the Holy Spirit in our life. So yeah, that's what he was doing. And so they were constantly saying, you're not doing it right.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. You know, in your sermon, again, I feel like you did a great job at really transitioning, you know, almost having, you know, 1 foot in the camp of 1 Corinthians, 1 foot in the camp of Sabbath.
So, a spiritual segue.
Yeah.
Ooh,
there it is.
Good, yeah.
A stamp on that one. You know, talking about, you know, communion, the Lord's Supper, you know, however we want to call it, and really leading off with, you know, this idea of, you know, do this in remembrance of me. Jesus said, when you do these things, do it in remembrance of me. And you talked about the importance of that. You even asked the question to the congregation, what Jesus are you remembering?
Yeah.
And you related it to your experience growing up, and how that, how do I say this? That experience, that paradigm, that way that you were remembering Jesus really had to change, and the Lord did a work in your life, so that it wasn't this look at, you know, kind of finger wagging, scolding, you know, look at what he did because of you, or you know, something like that. So I kind of wanted to maybe start this discussion with, why do we often not remember Jesus in the right way, and why was it important to Jesus that we do remember him in the right way?
Yeah. The big answer to that question is that has been the goal of the enemy since the garden. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let me change your perspective about God. Mm-hmm. With Eve, it was very simply a question that was a lie. And the question was, did God say? Did he really say that? Did he really say that? And so consequently, when Jesus comes along all of those years later, even though the entire Old Testament points to this life that's going to be lived a certain way, they missed it. They completely missed it. And why did they miss it? Because of these lies that had been put in. And so the enemy of our soul does not have a lot of weapons left, but the ones that he has are very well honed. And what he has is lies, deception, and fear. Mm-hmm. So consequently, growing up for me, and this isn't the fault of any one particular religion. I want to be that clear. It's just my experience. But growing up, there was always this sense that you couldn't measure up. After all, you had to go and get things right at least once a week. And you had to do it not by yourself, but with other people. You had to have somebody else, because you couldn't cross that boundary. And so consequently, here is this Jesus that is completely contrary to who he said he was. Come unto me, you who have worked yourself to exhaustion, and I'll give you rest. And this religious spirit that goes on that says that's not really true, or did God really say that? So consequently, and when you consider that any of us who were raised in a tradition, 80% of everything you learn in life happens in the first 4 years of life. That's what you believe. So even as a young pastor, I still had a lot of work to do with who is this God, and who is he really? And for me, oftentimes he was a benevolent judge. So and then when this revelation comes and it was just the simple words of Jesus, come to me. It's okay to really approach him. When you look at the people who are really, really broken, who approach Jesus, he completely went against all of the religious models of the day. You think of the amazing one were the lepers that came to him, and it says he touched them. Now, if you think of the story of the Good Samaritan, for example, you have a priest and a Levite, and they go by this man, and you think, well, that is really cold-hearted. Yes, it is, but it's also the religious doctrine that they were raised in. They were on their way to the temple. had they touched that person, they would have been unclean. They would not have been able to approach God if they approached someone in trouble. So who is more important, the person in trouble or God? So you stay away.
Sure.
Jesus comes, and because the rule was, if you touch something unclean, then you are also unclean. Jesus comes with the worst people that society could imagine, lepers. And they come to him and they say, will you make us clean? And he just doesn't say, go, you're clean. At one point he does.
Sure.
But at another point, the Bible says he touched them. So here was the clean one touching the unclean one, and the clean one did not become unclean, but the unclean one becomes clean. That's the God that we serve.
Yeah.
That's him.
Yeah.
And so consequently, when we think of this whole thing of Sabbath and remembering who Jesus is, this is a great time to dig in and look at just those two scriptures. Come unto me, Matthew 11:28. And then in John, I will give you rivers of living water. That means an excessive, wasteful amount of life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Long answer. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
yeah,
okay,
definitely. Well, and I think, the reason is that Jesus, emphasized, remember me. It's so that we would, not that we would necessarily be perfect, but that we would take a pause and reflect on what did he actually say? What did he actually do? How did we see him, be different, be who he said he was, here's the cool thing is how do we see him being who God said he was all the way back in the Old Testament? Yeah.
Yeah. And when he said, remember me, and again, I don't know about other people. I really don't. But I can tell you that remembering for me was always right in front of me. It was Jesus dying on a cross.
Sure.
And yet, when he said that to the disciples, when he said it to the apostles in that room, that hadn't happened yet. You can't remember something that hasn't happened.
That's good. That's yeah.
And so what was he saying? Remember all that I've done. Remember the things I said. Don't forget who I am.
Yeah.
Because the world is going to tell you that's not who I really am. So he was, I think, reflecting on everything. Now, they remembered what happened in that passion. They remembered. Peter remembered.
Yeah.
He remembered denying Christ. Yeah. He remembered on the beach. He remembered it all. Because in his letters, he says at one point, and God can rescue the sinners.
Yeah.
How did he know that? Well, he knew it.
Yeah.
So he remembered. He remembered it all. But more important than anything else is you read the Gospels and you count up, except for John, who took the majority of his gospel to reflect from John 13 forward all the way to the end, that last week of Christ. And even before that, that was the Last Supper and the tragedy. But as you read the rest of the Gospels and you realize that what was recorded in there was the life of Christ that he wants us to remember. That's what he wants us to remember.
Yeah, that's good. And I loved what you said on Sunday. There was no one who was more approachable than Jesus.
Yeah.
And, if we really think about it and take these things to heart, he was always inviting people to come to him, or he was going to them himself.
Yeah.
And so
never forcing anybody.
Yeah, exactly. It was always this, and you mentioned this, Matthew 11:28, come unto me.
Yeah.
And that beautiful picture of that Last Supper, it was still the same. Those echoes were there to have that kind of an intimate friend. No longer do I call you my servants, my slaves. I call you my friends.
Yeah, and those words are so exacting in the Greek. The word servant is actually the word for slave. The word for friend is a beautiful, beautiful word in the Greek that means it is a special friend that is in the close circle around the king, around the ruler.
Wow.
And so he says to them at that point, you've been serving me, you've been doing what I told you to do, you've been doing what I insisted that you do, you've been doing your best. No more. Now, I'm going to share with you intimately everything about the kingdom that I know. And how is he going to do that? Because he's going to send the Holy Spirit who will teach us all things, who will lead us in all things. It is incredible when you begin to see the whole picture that Jesus saw long before those apostles saw and long before so many Christians see. You know, we really can rest. And it doesn't mean that we give up, but we really can rest. And yes, there's going to be tribulation, there's going to be hard times, but that doesn't mean that even in the midst of turmoil, of extreme turmoil, we can't do what we need to do to enter into rest. And that is prayer.
Yeah.
Prayer.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Prayer without ceasing.
Yeah, that's good. So how do we, how does remembering Jesus in the right way lead us into this lifestyle of Sabbath? I know we've kind of touched on this a little bit already, but if you could kind of maybe work that out a little bit, if we, I want to be careful how I phrase this because I don't want it to all be, think and do, but yeah, how does, let's say that, I'm remembering Jesus the way that he was, the way that when he was on this earth, how does that lead me into this continuous lifestyle of Sabbath rest?
Yeah. Oh, I don't think it's a think and do. I think it goes back to something that I've said for a long time. In fact, I'm working with a young man right now, and this young man has a vision of where he wants to be 5 years from now. It includes finishing school. It includes getting married. 10-year plan is to have kids. That's a vision.
Yep.
Without a vision, people perish. But without a plan, a vision perishes. You've heard me say this so often.
Absolutely.
Without a plan. And the plan is a step-by-step process towards the vision. And that's where people get messed up.
Yeah.
So how do we enter into rest? Well, I wish I would have brought one of my devotionals. I'd read my devotional. The devotional this year is all about prayer.
Yeah.
And prayer is the number one way that we relate to Jesus. And prayer is not closing your eyes, having a list, having a closet. All of those things are prayer. But the kind of prayer that Jesus had with the Father was a continual conversation with him. So one of the things that people can do during this time is really to establish like an early morning prayer time. And I mean 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, I don't care, but do something out of the ordinary. And it's not just about asking God for things.
Yeah.
Have you ever had a friend that the only time you hear from them is when they're calling and asking for something?
I need something.
Yeah. I mean, that's the number you want in your phone so you can say, I'm not going to answer that right now. I'll do it later. Yeah. But then there are other people who are putting into your life. That's what we need to be doing as far as our prayers are concerned. So consequently, through the day today, I'm going to walk out of here and I'm going to say, Lord, thank you for just the time with Travis. We don't get to spend a lot of time together. Yeah. Gratefulness is a huge part of Sabbath. And gratefulness in prayer is a huge thing to add to our prayer list. So we're not always just asking God for things. That's where we begin. Babies are always asking for something.
Yeah.
And we always meet their need because we love them. But there comes a point where we want that little kid to wrap their arms around us and just hug us and say, I sure love you. My grandson did that to me over the weekend. He just came over and he wrapped his arms around me. Pop, I sure love you. And yeah, that's it. That now we're growing up. Yeah. And that's the relationship that we have to have with God. So how do we get to there? I think it begins with a retooling of prayer where prayer becomes a constant relationship with God.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that I'm always asking, but it also doesn't mean that I'm not saying, Lord, this is really hard. A little bit of wisdom here. I can't tell you how many times I've lost something and I've said, Lord, there goes my old Catholic. I can't remember the saint we prayed to, but sure. Boy, oh boy, he was effective,
Wow.
And so things like that.
Yeah.
Lord, this conversation was awful. Lord, I'm just hurting. It means relating to God on a continual basis, and then having those times where we are interceding and supplicating, those two different things. Interceding, bringing things before God for other people. Supplication, bringing things before God for myself.
That's good.
So I think that that's a great place to start.
Yeah. I heard this. Well, let me back up before I jump into that. A few weeks ago, Pastor Daniel. You don't know Pastor Daniel? He's our youth pastor, among some other things around here. But he preached on basically asking our students this question: who's your source? Mm-hmm. You know, are you looking to the world? Are you looking to comfort? Are you looking to entertainment? Are you looking to God for your source? And that doesn't mean that, you know, some of these things are inherently bad. It's what place do they hold in your life? And I think about that, what you said about, you know, man, if I had a hard day, if I had a moment of pain with a friend or something like that was really hard, you know, this hard relationship moment, you know, am I taking that back to God? And I also think too, in our world today, we're so much about hustle, 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 hurry, 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 you know, skip the intro because I want to get to the, you know, the show, or, you know, I'm going to go get to the lane that has one car less, you know, because I'm in a hurry. And I heard this great quote. This man is a professor of the Bible and theology at Bushnell University. He's got a great name, A.J. Swoboda. If I got that right, isn't that a great name? He said, it's, you know, the problem is not that we don't love God, it's that we don't know how to sit with him anymore.
Rest.
Yeah.
Sabbath.
Yeah. And so just this, again, concept is not the right word. Truth, biblical truth.
Biblical truth.
Is that we can be with God anytime, anywhere. And that is the amazing gift of Sabbath in a New Testament context. And to really sit and think about communion. You know, we have this word for it, you know, in more liturgical traditions, they call it the Eucharist. But if we go through it not as this rote religious practice, but we really think Jesus did this so that we could have this open relationship. We could continuously have not a monologue, but a dialogue with God. Yeah. And we can now be considered friends with God. Yeah. It really is an amazing thing when you stop and think about it. And unfortunately, to one degree or another, we don't take the time to really consider what communion means. And again, not in a finger wagging, you know, disappointed or judgmental kind of a way, but in this freedom. Yeah. Look what Jesus purchased for me. Yeah. Look at what he did for me. Yeah. You know, we sang this song on this past Sunday, "No guilt, no shame is greater than the great I am." And so often I think whether it's hurry, whether it's shame, it keeps us from coming to him. Yeah. And yet there's that open door. And I mean, I can just imagine when your grandson hugged you and just said, "Pop, I sure love you." I mean, man, I bet your heart was just melted into a puddle, you know? Yeah, and I think about that when my kids run up to me, you know, it's just like, "Oh man, this is so good. Thank you." You know, it's just an amazing moment. And imagine the heart of God when we come to him, whether it's good, whether it's, you know, bad, you know, but if we make that time, I mean, imagine what would change in our world, in our life.
I often talk about, I love Sabbath, the whole concept of it. And the very beginning of it was, of course, was all the way back in Genesis, where at the end of each day of those 6 days of creation, God said, or the word says that it was morning and it was evening, the first day, second day, morning and evening, morning and evening, morning and evening. But on the seventh day, and again, Adam created on the sixth day. And if you can imagine Adam saying, "Oh, this is awesome. Look at all of this stuff. Everything's new." And he says to God, "God, what are we going to do tomorrow? What are we going to do tomorrow?" And God says, "Adam, you come and find me because I'm going to teach you the most important thing you'll ever know." And so here's Adam, and he wakes up on that seventh day, and he runs and he finds God. And he says, "Okay, God, what are we going to do?" And he says, "Adam, come on over here. Today you're just going to be with me. You're just going to rest." But here's the kicker. The kicker is that the seventh day was the only day that it didn't say there was morning and there was evening. And the old rabbis really believed that the Sabbath was supposed to go on and on and on. It was supposed to never end. Mm-hmm. And because of sin, of course, it ended. So there's a lot of the Sabbath that we can't enter into. We won't know about the utter Sabbath, the complete Sabbath, and Revelations talks about it.
Yeah.
You can read about it.
Yeah.
How there's going to be this day that is the unending Sabbath,
Yeah.
rest of God from that point on. But we can experience a lot of it right here, and we've got to remember that, and we've got to receive that gift from God that says that I can live with a whole lot less turmoil than other people, because of God's great gift of rest. And it has to be practiced. Mm-hmm. It has to be practiced through prayer. It has to be practiced through the very reason for communion, Last Supper, the Eucharist, whatever you want to call it, which is getting right with God and getting right with man. Mm-hmm. That has to be a continual thing. Yeah. It has to be, we have to remember who Jesus is. And see, that's part of my upbringing that I take away from me, that we've actually introduced in this church, where every Sunday we have communion available. I take communion every Sunday. Yeah. Every Sunday, not because it got popular here a couple years ago. Oh, you got to take communion every time you come together. I'm thinking, you old Baptist, you don't know what you're talking about. We did that all the time, you know. But why? So that I can have that remembrance of this is what Jesus did for me, and this is who Jesus is now. Right. You know? It's so important. Yeah. That's Sabbath. It's Sabbath.
Yeah, it really is. Well, I'm excited to dive into this series more. Again, I've been here, going on 20 years now. It's wild. 2004 is when I first came.
Really?
Isn't that wild? I know.
It wasn't until 2004?
2004, yep. Wow. Yep. But, experienced a lot of Sabbaths, and I'm excited to dive into this one. So thank you for taking some time out of your day today to talk a little bit more about your message. And thank you for watching or listening to another episode of Monday Moments. As always, we love hearing from you. So if you got anything out of this, how do you Sabbath? How have you experienced Sabbath in your life? How has the Lord maybe revealed to you something that you never saw before about the nature of his character that led you into a deeper, quieter, more restful relationship with him? We would love to hear that. It would certainly bless us and encourage us.
Yeah, and one other thing, Travis, I know that you did a lot of work on getting this flip book thing going.
Sure.
When are we going to tell people about that and what we're going to do with it?
Yeah. So if you're a part of our congregation, we have a devotional that we would love to just bless you with. You can pick up a physical copy here at our church if you come, but if you want to be online, what we will do is in our show notes, either in our podcast show notes or our YouTube channel description, we will add a link if you would like a digital copy of that. You can read that at home on your laptop, tablet, iPhone, whatever your favorite
It's really
device
new
is.
this year.
This is the first time we're trying this out. Yeah. You can take it with you. Another instance of that continuous Sabbath. You can take it wherever you want. Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Monday Moments, and we will see you next week.